Hello friends, you are on the YouTube channel of Channel 24. I'm Anastasia Noritsyna, and with us is military expert Petro Chernyk. Petro, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Today we are recording a military update and discussing the news as of October 24th. So the Americans finally saw the DPRK troops in Russia. A little more time, and maybe they will realize that they did not come there to drink tea and eat dried meat. But Mr. Petro, I wonder why the West, which had all the intelligence about Russia's preparations for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, is now reacting so weakly to the North Koreans. At first, the West did not see them, and now they claim that they do not know what they will do. If we are talking about America, it is one thing, and if we are talking about the so-called Euro-Atlantic space, it is a bit different. We understand that the global challenge is primarily facing the United States of America. Why this reaction and not another? It's simple, just elections. And not only the presidential election, but also the election of the Congress as a whole, both the lower and upper houses. Until there is a full cabinet change, whether with Kamala Harris or a radical coup bringing Trump back, the position will remain the same. No serious decisions will be made until the power changes. Even statements about uncertainty regarding the Koreans in Russia seem inadequate. When Austin visited Kyiv, he should have received this information from our intelligence, but he's not the one making decisions. I'll repeat, until changes in the Oval Office occur, no serious decisions will be made in America. Without the prospect of serious decisions, there is also no political rhetoric. South Korea is considering sending military specialists and intelligence officers to help with interrogations of North Korean prisoners and translation. Seoul is considering the possibility of supplying lethal weapons to Ukraine instead of just humanitarian aid. Peter, what influence can South Korea have on this situation? This could have serious consequences, but will South Korea's leaders have the political will and capacity to help? South Korea is a major global manufacturer of high-quality weapons. Let's look at what they could provide us with if they wanted to help. First and foremost, these are heavy ballistic and cruise missiles of the Henmu series, developed since 1982, with a range of 300 to 1,500 kilometers. The warheads weigh from 500 kilograms to 1 ton, which is quite serious weapons. 2 launchers and 30 missiles for each would be a significant step forward. In June, the modern KF-21 Generation 4+ aircraft was launched into production. Similar to F-35 in configuration and F-16 in performance. There is skepticism about the possibility of this. But if there is political will, much is possible. 6 of these machines, along with the F-16, would significantly enhance our sky protection. The key element is artillery, particularly the 155mm K-90 Thunder system, an analog of the Panzergun 200 for standard M107 and M549 shells. Its chassis also serves as the basis for Polish-made artillery systems like the Krap from Hyundai. It would be great if they had 1 division. Even the South Korean army has somewhere in the range of 40 BTR-80 armored personnel carriers in service, and they have them, and even the T-80U tanks are still Soviet. And let's not forget that this is a country that produces a huge amount of microelectronics, and microelectronics is used directly in electronic warfare and in drones. Do they have anything to give? Yes, they do, and in very large quantities. The question is whether they will do it. And do you have an explanation for why we have not been given this lethal weapon until now? Maybe there are contracts with other countries for their supply. The same KF-21, there is a contract with Indonesia, there is a contract with Turkey. Saudi Arabia is looking at this aircraft, plus their own needs. Our war did not affect them in any way. It did. Currently, the situation is like this. If there's a fight on the neighboring street and you have 2 carbines, you won't give them away until the fight threatens you. Only when it's clear the robbers might reach your house will you help your neighbors. This reflects basic human psychology. Can the presence of military contingents in Ukraine encourage our European partners to send their troops? In my opinion, no, this will not happen. You need to be obvious. We've already discussed in the studio what constitutes a clear-cut attack. Either Pearl Harbor in the Second World War, when the Japanese attacked the U.S. Pacific Fleet, or the notional Lusitania should sink, as it did in the First World War, when the Germans sank an American liner. Until the missile arrives in Berlin, and it is proved that it was not a spontaneous launch, but really an order from Putin, there will be a lot of discussion. Until a NATO soldier sets foot on our land in the literal sense of combat, because there may be instructors, why not? They will not set foot on our land. Let's rewind not so far in recent history. There was a lot of hype, noise, a huge information bubble about the French Foreign Legion. By the way, the commander is even a Ukrainian by birth, so what? Macron had to reflect, first of all, for his own internal political situation on the eve of the election. He reflected, where is this legion? Where are the soldiers who would at least replace our soldiers at strategic points, say defense, protection of nuclear power plants? And there is no way to deliver the freed up resources to the battlefield. This is the democratic world. Until they are hit, they will not wake up. Our intelligence reports that the Koreans are likely to work in the Kursk region of Russia. What can they do there? Are the Russians so bad that they can't cope on their own? We have a foothold, we are conducting offensive actions, so it can be expanded. How do we do this? To stop this, first of all, we need to build defensive structures, i.e. digging trenches, equipping them with caponniers, mines, and so on. North Korea's notional engineering brigade can easily replace such a brigade from the Russian army, and it is not a problem for them to turn this brigade into ordinary infantry, i.e. Russian.
Бригаду надзвичайну піхоту, тобто російську, для них не складає ніякої проблеми. Не таємниця, що навіть матросів із важкого ракетного
It's no secret that sailors from the Kuznetsov aircraft carrier were turned into ordinary infantry, despite the costly training required for their specific roles. I believe this is how North Korean troops will first be utilized. Peter, again, if we go back to the reaction of the West, we've discussed on air that the U.S. fears significant success in Ukraine could lead to the collapse of the Russian Federation and the risk of uncontrolled nuclear weapons. However, we now see Russian nuclear weapons spreading to different countries, like Belarus and potentially North Korea, at least in terms of technology, according to the GER.
І в Білорусі, тепер може опинитися у Північній Кореї, принаймні технології про це кажуть у ГУР. А от чи вважаєте, що саме цей факт
Can this fact, even after the U.S. presidential election, force the United States to react accordingly? It is necessary to emphasize the correct meaning of nuclear proliferation, not to confuse it with transfer, which is different. Proliferation is when a country with nuclear technology does not control the spread of its weapons. Let's take a simple example. Prigozhin entered the Voronezh 45 nuclear storage facility and could potentially blow up the protective caponniers, getting to the nuclear weapons. Could it be applied? No, it's impossible. It's impossible. But let's imagine that one round of the Pion artillery system in the nuclear part, 237mm caliber, weighs within 100 kilograms, and there are 152mm ones. The Acacia and Hyacinth can launch a 50 kilograms nuclear projectile, which measures 15 centimeters in radius and over a meter in length. If terrorists acquire such a projectile, they could cover it with conventional explosives and detonate it in places like New York. While this wouldn't cause a nuclear explosion or significant radioactive contamination, the psychological effect could be substantial. This is proliferation and unraveling, as seen with Belarus and North Korea, which signals a significant global shift. The U.S. is more concerned about proliferation than transfer, as chaos in the Russian Federation makes controlling strategic nuclear weapons challenging. The American Airborne Division, known as the Eagle, is preparing for this, equipped for deep landings up to 800 kilometers and beyond. But there is no answer to this question of how to protect all the small warehouses that are sown throughout the Russian Federation. Today, Lukashenko said that Russia will not be able to use nuclear weapons on his territory without his consent. But he tells himself whatever he wants. He is fighting for his life. He is fighting for his life. He is leveraging his unique position to flirt with us for leverage. While diplomatic relations remain intact, Putin lacks full control over him and his family. He's seeking a way to maintain his position, regardless of any issues with Putin. This raises questions about whether the North Koreans can effectively confront the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kursk region. Because some media wrote that some super-trained special forces are being sent there. Well, the fact that there are those slaves, as they are called, Kimchinino, are people who absolutely live in a world that only they know, and that they can be incredibly determined and brave cannon fodder. This opinion can be assumed, but there is a nuance. If the 50,000-strong Russian corps still cannot knock us out of the Kursk region, how will a North Korean division or 2 brigades be able to accomplish this task? First, they must be provided with the necessary equipment, but I doubt very much that they have it. Secondly, they need to understand the territory properly, which takes time and time again. And thirdly, they need to have a full-fledged combat force to interact with Russian troops. It's a very fast-moving phenomenon. I still have a hard time imagining how a South Korean water coyote will quickly and lightning fast interact with his Russian colleagues in terms of translating commands, which sometimes takes seconds. And the language is very difficult. Russian is difficult for Koreans. North Korean is very difficult for Russians. There is no mass phenomenon called bilinguals. You need translators. And translators are needed to provide them. Bilingualism isn't widespread. Both languages exist, but there aren't enough translators for the troops. The Zionomist publication reports that Zaporizhzhia may be the next target for the Russian army, with military officials suggesting a shift in focus after successes in Donetsk. Reports also indicate intensified activities at the training ground near Berdyansk, forming a striking force. What do you think about this? Do you notice a tendency to prepare for a real breakthrough operation in the Zaporizhzhia area and reach the largest city? And this is a huge city. We need a 40,000-strong corps, at least 2 such corps. Where can we get them? We show fantastic figures for the destruction of the enemy on the battlefield in September. Another record was set. They replaced between 36 to 38,000, no more than 40,000 people per month. So far, I haven't seen them come out. This could be a classic IPSO to distract our attention, to stir up fear among us. We are talking about this event. Is it possible that some kind of offensive operation will take place there? Why not? They got stuck near Pokrovsk. We remember one of the rules of the attacking side. If they can't do it in one direction, they must switch to another. Why? Because if you don't, the party on the defensive will sooner or later prepare the conditions and launch a counterattack. They cannot allow this to happen. Plus, there's one more thing. Every day, the wet weather season is approaching, i.e. precipitation. As soon as it rains, there will be no need to talk about any major breakthrough operation. Although, by the way, I do not rule out another act of madness, because it is quite normal for them, that they will try to test the same North Korean division in this way near Zaporizhzhia. I am not saying that this will happen. 40,000 strong corps, but Voloshin notes that up to 200,000 Russian occupiers are concentrated against Ukrainian forces in the south, covering Zaporizhzhia, Pridniprovia, and Crimea. He is correct in addressing the entire 400-kilometer southern demarcation line, where these forces are concentrated. The corps is expected to break through a section of no more than 50 to 60 kilometers. They need to concentrate the 40,000-strong corps somewhere in this area. I don't think they have the potential to do that now. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has defended U.S. restrictions on long-range strikes by Western weapons against Russia. He insists that Ukraine can defeat Russia even without such a capability. And he says this once again after a visit to Ukraine. And Russia is escalating. We see it, we are talking about it, because it is Russia that is adding DPRK troops to this war. And so, if our partners do not send their contingents to our territory, then at least let us use Western weapons to attack Russia. Why not? We have already discussed this issue. The incoming administration will not take such a serious decision at the end of its political term. This is the reality. They believe that they have served their term with dignity. No one can estimate the consequences of the use of heavy American missiles against Russia, and they are correctly aware of this. If our time is coming to an end, let it happen in peace. Can Russia take advantage of the 2 weeks before the U.S. elections to achieve success at the front? And what can they use? What can Russia offer besides nuclear weapons and, say, bacteriological or chemical weapons? By the way, they have already used chlorine benzene against us, if I'm not mistaken, a K-51 grenade, and not only that, not to mention white phosphorus. They lack any trump cards in their military arsenal. They've used everything from the Makarov pistol to a wide range of missiles, except for the RS-24 Yars, which is a strategic nuclear weapon. The question remains, can a nuclear warhead be conditionally removed and placed here? That's a difficult question.
ядерну боєголовку забрати і поставити звичайно складне питання. Ні, от сам для себе експертував, ніде не зустрічав інформації, що так вона розроблялася, що можна туди
The submarine fleet. Again, the same heavy ballistic missiles. This is the nuclear component. Everything else has been applied. The highest infantry ramparts that could be applied have been applied. All possible mercenaries on the planet Earth that they could contract for money have been contracted. Wherever they could find their old Soviet equipment, from Africa to Latin America, they found it and brought it. They are now using North Koreans, have employed Iranians, and taken everything possible from the Chinese. What kind of success can they expect? There will be a real breakdown in our defense. That's it. Mutual cessation of attacks on energy infrastructure could be the first step towards ending the hot phase of the war, Zelenskyy said in a statement. How should we understand this statement? It's more of a tactical nature, because we know that the BRICS summit with Russia is taking place now. This might be an attempt to get Chinese President Xi and Indian Prime Minister Modi to influence Putin against striking Ukrainian nuclear power plants or energy facilities. It's a reasonable idea to ask if our Ukrainian issue will be discussed among the global South and the world's tyrannies, which are all gathered there. This signals the need to seek points of contact, at least in this area.
І оце такий певний сигнал, що давайте шукати якусь точку дотику хоча б у цій частині.
We have already talked about the fact that the formula for finding a way out of this phase of the war has begun to be written. They have begun to write. And these are the brush strokes in the diplomatic sense on this large canvas. Forgive me for speaking metaphorically, but at the same time, Chinese leader Xi Jinping is promoting his idea of a Sino-Brazilian plan, creating a group of friends of peace, a so-called group, and even India is being included. What is interesting is why China is now interested in applying their plan, their formula, if everything along the lines that exist at the moment is frozen. Well, this is 27% of our territory, which is a lot, in some part not in full, because diplomacy and geopolitics are a multifaceted, multivariable, multi-vector phenomenon. There are thousands of shades. There is no black and white. It's very complicated, but we'll try to reduce it to a common denominator. This will definitely be the first round, not the main round, but the first round of victory for the proxy war, the war of democracy and tyranny in Ukraine. So yes, it will be their victory. In my understanding, our round is if we manage to recapture some part of the territory, a large part, according to, say, the pattern of the Kharkiv operation, or change it. Well, why not? We're not going to annex Kursk. We're not going to create any government there. We didn't seize it at all, because there is so much foolishness in our media spaces. Once we seize the territory, we need to seize even more. No, we did not seize it. We are conducting a military operation on their territory. These are very important things in terms of definitions. And this process of clarifying the position, who has more power, who will have better positions, and most importantly, in the end, as it turns out, is exactly what happens online. Commenting on the BRICS summit, the foreign ministry said that Russia had failed to export its neo-imperialist views on changing the world order and global security architecture to the participants of the meeting because of, among other things, its aggression against Ukraine. And I'll quote what they wrote. Moscow's attempts to impose the idea of an allegedly alternative position of the so-called global South on Russian aggression against Ukraine have failed. Can we really say that this Putin show has failed, or is there still a danger for us in such gatherings? Yes, of course, we do. Our diplomats are acting competently, correctly, and they should. They have to show a position of strength, and they do. We cannot remain silent. Did Putin achieve all the goals he wanted? He definitely hasn't. The fact that the Brazilian president did not come is indeed a very serious and important signal that the global south is not such a homogeneous phenomenon. But the fact that the world's tyrannies will try to write the chapter of building a new world order as they understand it is also a clear conclusion. President Zelenskyy is preparing another plan. But this time we are talking about a document that provides for the steps that our state, Ukraine itself, should take. And this document will cover many areas: the military-industrial complex, defense, economy, social policy, and others. And will this plan be able to work without Western support, depending on what is meant by Western support?
Якщо передавати зброю в прямому розумінні, от Мін-104 Патріот, це їхня розробка, там немає ні грами нічого нашого. І так ми проходимо...
Well, the same funds, weapons, technologies. If we transfer weapons in the literal sense, for example, the MIM-104 Patriot is their development, there is not a single gram of anything of ours. And so we go through all the equipment they have provided. And if you look at the fact that they transfer technologies to us, for example, a plant,
Це вже дещо інша ситуація, і так можна пройтися по кожній категорії зброї. Ми ж маємо і власні унікальні добротні.
Their plant for the production of 155 millimeter shells, but it is being built somewhere underground in the Carpathians.
Прекрасна ракета, яку треба ставити на конвейер, не кажучи вже про безпілотні системи.
If the staff and materials are ours, the situation changes. We can explore various weapon categories, including unique developments like the Grom, Sapsan, and R-360 Neptune missile, which need to be produced. We also have resources from Antonov, now returned from Russian ownership, an early 90s project for an attack helicopter involving Ukraine, France, and Israel still holds potential and may be further developed. Mr. Petro, thank you very much for the information, for finding time for our broadcast, and I wish you a good and, most importantly, peaceful day. Let me remind you that Petro Chernyk was with us. Don't forget to like, comment, and tell us what city or country you are watching from. Share this video so that more people can see it.
Дякую за увагу, хороших новин і до зустрічі.
Дякую.